Researchers have found that when evaluating employees in the workplace, some biases can creep in and inappropriately affect those judgments. The information sheet you'll look at in a moment lays out 4 kinds of bias. Prove it again bias refers to cases where some employees, perhaps they belong to a group that is stereotyped as less competent, are forced to prove themselves over and over again before they're seen as competent. For example, the mistakes of women might be noticed or remembered more than the mistakes of men. Or the performance of a person of color might be dismissed as luck rather than skill. The prove it again bias might lead to unfair evaluations. The second type of bias is called tightrope bias. This is when a narrower range of workplace behaviors is considered acceptable from women and from people of color than from men and white employees. In other words, members of some groups must walk a tightrope, making sure they're not too assertive because this might be perceived as angry and abrasive, or these individuals may feel they must take on some roles because they're expected to, such as being the note taker at a meeting, even when this comes at a cost to their perceived leadership potential. Tightrope bias can mean that behavior that's tolerated from one group is viewed as problematic from another group. The third kind of bias is called the parental wall, which can affect judgments of caregivers as well as employees without children. For example, employers may assume that a mother won't want a job that involves traveling, or that fathers don't need time off for childcare, or that employees without children are free to pick up the slack for those who have kids. Employees' parental status should not be used to make judgments or assumptions about their on-the-job performance. Finally, the tug-of-war is another kind of bias. This is when conflict may be created between members of underrepresented groups within a company. For example, people from underrepresented groups, like racial minorities, may feel they must either align themselves or distance themselves from other members of their groups in order to get ahead. Or they may hold members of their own group to higher standards than members of other groups. This can lead to bias in performance evaluations as well. The sheet you've been handed reviews these biases and lays out specific steps to writing good performance evaluations and interrupting bias. Please take a close look.